It is 7 o'clock, and we will start. And I want to welcome everybody to um, our breakout session. We have Jared Walder, and is Christine there too?
I am, yes.
And Christine here is Sam on? I wonder. He's probably not on. And myself is Marv Bateman, and I just want to give Jared, why don't you introduce yourself, and Christine, you, and just introduce yourself and your relationship with Native Americans.
Sure. Do you want to go first?
No, you go first.
Okay. My name is Jared Walter. Christine's my wife. I'll let her talk in a minute. But our relationship is, we'll probably get into more of it, but basically we've been introduced and have established some strengthening relationships with some families that are part of the Hopi tribe up in the middle of the Navajo reservation. And so, like I said, I think as we go through this, we'll talk a little bit more about what our experience has been. But go ahead.
I'm Christine. I belong to the Jared guy right here. Yeah, we've been introduced about a year ago, last month.
Yeah.
So our relationship with them is fairly new, but I would say strong.
Yeah. And
with a couple of them, yeah, and it's been a great one. So.
Okay, and I'm Marv Bateman. I've been going down to Hopi since 1993, I believe, about 27 years. And so that I've worked with, I've done things with the Lakota and with some of the other tribes, the Paiute and so forth. Before we start, we'd like to have a word of prayer. And is there anybody that would be willing to say a prayer? You have a little button off the right that you can raise your hand if you'd like to do that, and we can unmute you and do that. Would anybody be interested in doing that? Maybe a better question would be, would anybody not want to do that? Okay, I'll say it. Father in heaven, we come at this time to be able to discuss the Native Americans and how we can relate the lost sheep remnant of this land, and how we can join with them and fulfill the covenant which you have given us, so that we can honor that, and so that we can understand them and understand our task before us. We are grateful, Father, that you honor all people, whether they're black, white, yellow, or red, and we honor that. And we pray, Father, that that your wisdom will be with us, and that you'll guide us and help us all to unite in love and harmony, that we may be able to understand one another, and that we may be able to enjoy our relationship with you and what you have given not only us, but other people around the world, that we may be able to unite in that and unite in Christ. We ask for your blessings to be with us this night and to be with all the people in the world. And say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. at the Boise conference, we were given a covenant at the covenant conference that we all, for those who joined and participated in that. And part of it was to seek to recover the lost sheep remnant of this land and of Israel, and no longer forsake them, bring them unto me, and teach them of my ways, to walk in them. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to kind of go into two sections or two areas. One, I'd like to address any questions that you have. We've already had a couple of questions, two or three questions that we'll start out with. But if you want to think of anything that we can do to help you fulfill your part in the requirement of the covenant to bring these people, or actually to unite these people, because it goes two ways. But if you can think of some questions that you may have that we could help you answer, that would be good. The next, that'll be the first portion of it. The second portion of it, we'll be discussing what Native Americans want to tell white people, and then the last section, we're going to have opportunities to put this into practice that will require your time, if whoever wants to join and help out down in Hopi land, to put in your time and your skill and your tools and your money in order to fulfill that. We have, I'll get into more of that later. So the first question that I have is from Lark, and the last name is C-Y-R. I don't know if that's Sear or Kerr. I guess it depends on what part of the South you're from, but it says, the first question is what do you suggest for an appropriate approach to Native Americans who are not of our faith in regards to the Restoration Movement? Any questions, Jared? Any thoughts?
Yeah, this is something that I know I've thought a lot about as we've interacted with those that we've had some association with. And for me, it's been challenging because I grew up LDS and missionary work, so to speak, or sharing with somebody involved, knocking on doors and sharing with them something that I want to share with them. And to use a term that Rob Adolfo once described to me, it was more about me telling people something rather than sharing or learning together. And as I've interacted with those who I have, it's twofold for me, because I want to understand. I don't want to begin speaking about something that's completely foreign in topic, foreign in understanding, and so it's a two-way street for me. Meaning, I ask questions, try to be respectful about that, because over time there's been some sensitivities and people with not good intentions inserting themselves and trying to manipulate people, and so there is a little bit of caution on their part to be very open. But my questions are about understanding their views of life, right? And maybe that's the best way to say it, is about life, right? And how do they relate to looking at the activities that they participate in, from their ceremonies and dances to harvesting corn and planting corn, and the processes that are involved in that, and understanding, or trying to understand rather, their view of their relationship with God, their relationship with the earth, their relationship with one another. And then at this point, I feel like I'm mostly pointing out similarities and acknowledging that what they believe and what I believe are many times the same. We might use different words to describe God. We might use different words to describe respect for the earth and things like that. But acknowledging that there is and are similarities between what I believe and what they believe, and slowly opening up the conversations to include, they know that I believe in Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is not a foreign figure to them. They know about him. In one case, the man grew up in a village where they participated in a Christian church. And so it's not that it's completely foreign ideas, but right now I feel like I'm drawing the parallels, drawing the connections between what I believe and what they believe. Christine wants to say something.
We actually just went up to visit them a couple days ago, and we walked outside. It was night, and we walked outside and looked up the stars, and I just started talking about the constellations and how they move to, and how it's like a big calendar in the sky, and talked a little bit about the ancient calendars that John Pratt has taught us, and how they revolve around the harvest. And I think Lauren, he perked up and he was like, oh, the harvest, because that's what they relate to. That's something that they understand a lot about. That's a huge part of their life. Their whole life revolves around their harvest. And so just kind of getting those parallels connected, I think, is important to just kind of find the commonality and talk about those things. But I think first and foremost is just building a relationship with them before you can really get into a lot of discussion too.
And not to spoil, I don't know if you're going to share Sam Bond's recording during this session or not, Marv, but not to spoil what he said, but he does share something that I've thought about, and it's relating the experience to the experience that Ammon had when he went among the Lamanites. He didn't show up and stand on a box and stand in the corner of the city and start shouting for everybody to repent. He went and he served, and he built some relationships, and he established trust, and then built upon common beliefs. The Great Spirit is a term that is familiar to the Hopi, but a more traditionalist might not necessarily recognize Jesus Christ. They might recognize him as a historical figure, but not somebody any more significant than that. But again, finding those parallels, those similarities, and then build on that, I feel like I don't feel like that's the approach I've taken. And I feel like we've begun to have some bigger conversations in the last couple of times we've been together. So
yeah, I've been going down to Hopi for 27 years, and the last true Hopi elder, his name was Manuel Heongua, and he and I were very close friends. We did ceremonies together, and I asked him one time, I said, this is like 20 years in, and I asked him, I said, when did you start to, when did you trust me? When did you begin to trust me? And he says, well, about 12 years. It took me about 12 years to gain trust with you. Because what Native Americans do is they'll tell you things, and they're polite. They're very polite. They'll tell you things. But then when they completely trust you, then they tell you the real stuff. And I did go down there with the purpose of trying to prove my religion is better than yours, because that would have been a bombshell. I went down there to learn. And I knew, I read a book, and I think there's only one book that I can find. You might be able to find another one, but it's called God's Chosen People by Azula Brinkerhoff. That's what started me going down there, besides Nibley was going down there. And I figured if Nibley was going down there, and I figured if after I read Zula's book, I wanted to go down there, and it wasn't until 4 years later before I did go down there. But they have those people. You find out that they probably are more Mormon than we are, or more into the Book of Mormon than we are, because the Book of Mormon is their heritage. And it's they're the people that laid down the weapons of war. They're the people that laid down and died. They have that in their heritage. And they have traditions that have been passed down that now, I mean, some of them are even forgetting right now, but they have traditions that have been passed down that bring you to the Book of Mormon. And the Book of Mormon, meaning that when they told me that talked about Masao coming down, Masao the Messiah, the Christ, comes down, and he talks with them and teaches them. And after he teaches them, he heals them, and he heals the sick, and he walks amongst them. And then when he left, he walks out to the east side of the mesa, and off the east side of the mesa, he walks up into the air and leaves. Well, if that sounds familiar to you, it is. It's the third Nephi scene. And but they have a more accurate account in their tradition than we have, because in the scriptures it just says, that the Lord left, and he went up in the air and went back to his father. But they actually walked with him out to the mesa and saw him leave and go. So they have a lot of things in there. In fact, I want to read a quote. It says, this is coming from Zula's book. It says, this is from Thomas Bianca, who was a Hopi elder. He's since died. It says, it's true, the Mormon book teaches many things similar to the Hopi teachings. In fact, some places it's the same. But Hopi has been warned against accepting or following for any other kind of religion that may come to them. They were to hold fast to the teachings that were given them by the Great Spirit. Basically, all religious teachings are the same, as the Hopi knows its source is the Great Spirit, or God, or whatever you want to call him. If you understand that they have in their culture some of those traditions, but they've kind of fallen off of that, because you're getting much more progressives down there than traditionalists, and the traditionalists hang on to their their religion, but and I was around a traditionalist all the time down there, and some of the other traditionalists down there, but they, you don't come in and say that we're right and you're wrong, and let me tell you the rest of the story, and because my name is Paul Harvey or whatever, and but my thing has been to learn how they pray and how they do things, and then at the appropriate time I suggest things to them in a way that that we can share and unite in Christ or in Maso, and that has worked for me. I know that, like I said, they're very polite people. The Hopi are, and most Native Americans are, but they'll tell you what you want to hear. But if you really want to know the truth, then you establish a trust level. You establish to where you can laugh and cry and work in the fields and go picking herbs and go out in the field and harvest the crop. And when somebody needs something down there and you have a trust level with them, they can call you up and say, look, I need a generator. My generator's broken, or it's about to break, and can you help me? And like my trust level with them or my friendship with them, and actually I've been adopted in the tribe, but it becomes more like Zion when you deal with the traditionalist. It's you help even if you're down to the last penny. You help and you do things. And so my thing has not been to go down there and let me tell you the rest of the story, because I know how this thing's going to end, because I have a different manual that you do. But they have a different manual too, and they have been taught by Christ to live the simple life, and they've been taught to honor and worship God in a non-worldly way, without that influence, because it's a whole different attitude of going down there. When I first went down there and going into a one-room building or house and having dirt floor and having a family live in there, and you look around at the poverty, and they're very, very humble people. In fact, just a quick story. Hendrickson over on Second Mesa and Rowena, they had 13 kids, and their trailer burned down, and they went to live with the mom and dad, and that's where they took their kids, is back home to that one room house with dirt floor with all 13 kids. And so to adjust our minds to what we have, and to integrate our minds into that level, then to me, I always tell my wife, I want to go back to Hopi to ground myself into reality rather than the fake world that we live in. In fact, Karen was, we were talking about the spirit, and she was, I know that she was talking about like the Holy Ghost, and she was, we were having a discussion about that, and she says, how do you white people how do white people connect with God when there's so much confusion and so much worldliness and so much busyness and noise and lights? And that was tough. But I says, you're probably in a better position than we are, because I know at least 2 times she's seen Christ, or been in the presence of Christ. But I have to agree with her. It's a lot tougher here because we get tied up and get doing things, and down there it's a little bit slower pace. But we may have more. I've said this many times. We may have more knowledge, but they live what they have been taught by Mossow that's been handed down. So anyway.
Marv, we have a raised hand.
Yeah.
Sky, if you can hear me, you've raised your hand, hopefully intentionally.
Yes, I did. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, I raised my hand when you made the comment about they have a hard time trusting. I read a book called The Bear River Massacre, Shoshone Story. The writer, Darren Perry, it just barely came out maybe a few months ago. But it was heartbreaking to read what happened to these people. And, they were betrayed so many different times. And I can understand why they would be hesitant to trust, and why they would be hesitant to share their sacred beliefs. And so I just wanted to point out, and this tribe specifically had some of their betrayals from the Mormon Church. Yeah. And so not just, for example, I don't know if you guys know about Washakie, but after this particular tribe had been massacred, which it wasn't by the Mormon Church, it was by this army people, which may have been, may have been encouraged by some church members, ironically, after they were massacred too. They came over from the east, came out west, and then they took territory that was Native American land, which is not part of the Book of Mormon. They didn't honor the Book of Mormon. And this tribe ended up being massacred. They apparently, some Indian members had stolen a horse from some other member, and the army this group decided they were going to come in, and they just wiped out pretty much the whole tribe. The only people that survived are the people that ran away. Yeah. And it brings me to tears just repeating some of the things that were in this book. But anyway, they had made friends after that. And I recommend the book. I'm not going to repeat some of it because I'm just going to cry and no one's going to be able to understand me. It's so sad. But then the survivors of this tribe, the handful, maybe 12, 2 dozen people that survived, they had nowhere to go. They needed friendships, and the church ended up being a relationship that they were able to survive, and they were given land and then shortly after driven off. And they would have other relationships, and like Washakie, after so long, they were given this land, and they had farmed, they had built houses, they had finally got land legally from the government, and the church, the LDS church, decided that they're going to sell this land to make money off of it. They had sent like one letter to one person, and didn't inform other people. A lot of them were somewhere else, I think in Idaho at the time. But I think he was a bishop. I might be saying it wrong. It was a member of the church, though. He was given orders from some of the higher ups to go and burn their houses down, and he did. And so they were displaced again, and not only displaced, but felt completely betrayed, because these were people that were members of the LDS church. They had taken on the faith, were trying to live, trying to live up to the Book of Mormon so things could come to pass. And here it is that after, so long of trying to do that, the church decides, oh, sorry, we're going to burn down your houses and sell your property. So anyway, I'm kind of going off on this tangent, but there's good reason. Yeah.
In our culture, we give away trust far too easy. We say, oh yeah, I trust you really easy. In their culture, you have to earn it. You have to be proven it. And once you prove it, then that's a different issue. But it's two different thoughts too. It's two different ways of thinking, because we live in this fast food environment, and we give away everything, and we're far too trusting. And that's one thing I've learned, is that you have to earn their trust.
And that's wise. That's a very wise thing. Yeah. And my original comment, or my original thought before I got off on my tangent, was that if we want trust, that we need to be trustworthy.
Yes.
And so there have been so many betrayals and so much trauma that has gone on for so long, that this is a very delicate situation. And if people are going to make attempts, I think that you really need to be willing to be respectful and patient and very trustworthy. Don't betray someone's trust. If you say you're going to be there, be there.
Exactly.
Be someone that they can rely on, and know that you're not going to betray them like all of these other generations have done. And so that was my raised hand.
Well,
Sorry.
I appreciate that, because that's exactly the way that it needs to be. Is that isn't that the way that it should be in the scriptures?
Yeah.
Isn't that the way that I mean, if somebody is going to trust somebody, you have to earn it. If you say that you're going to do something, you do it.
Yeah.
You don't come back 3 days later and say, let me give you an excuse and it'll be okay. It doesn't work in their culture. It just doesn't. I mean, if you say that you're going to be there at 12 o'clock, you better be there at 12 o'clock or before.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go down there, this is the other thing. I went down there way back in the 90s, and we took some people down, and there was 8 of us at the time, and Manuel came over. We were staying at the farmhouse, and he came over, and he walked around and he talked, and and so forth. And I was right by Bob, one of the guys that was with us, and Emmanuel comes over and says, "See that guy over there? Don't ever bring him back." And he hadn't even talked to him because they. I mean, I know this with Manuel. I'm not sure if all of them can do this, but I mean, he can feel their spirits. He can understand people's character, and so it's like in some aspects, it's like going down there and meeting Jesus and saying, "Okay, where's my faults?"
Yeah.
and so forth. But the other thing that I'd like to advise, and that is, if you do read books, the best books out there, Azula Brinkerhoff is the only white one that I know that has really been told the truth. And as far as the Hopis are concerned, I know Males has been down there, and Frank Waters, and they have their books and so forth. And I read some of them and I go, okay, well, yeah, that one, no, that one, no, that one, no, that one, yeah, that one, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the best, if you're going to get into some books, I would suggest Fool's Crow, which is a good one, or Black Hawk. And if you can get into some other, and if you can get into the indigenous writers, the Native American writers,
Mm-hmm.
they tell more of a truth, like Scott Momaday or Louise Erdrich, or Vine Delora Jr. Those are, you'll learn more from an indigenous writer than you will from a white person, because they don't always tell them that. I know that when I read Zula's book, and then experiencing 27 years of going down there, Zula was right on. She was also adopted into the tribe. She was given a Hopi name, like I've been given a name. And so it's once you get it to the point of establishing a relationship, which took a long time, because, you know, when I was going down there, I started going down there only like once a year, and then twice a year, and then, you know, now I go down there several times a year. But they tell you more and more of the truth, and which is really fascinating to me.
So is the truth that you're talking about their belief systems and the ceremonies that they have, the symbolism, or
what? Well, the more and more you get into the truth with them, you'll see. You can always compare them with the scriptures, but you can see what God has done with them, and you can tell where the original religion was, because it does fade over time. I mean, even in the 27 years that I've been going down there, it's changed drastically, especially now. For a long time, it did not, because they were secluded to the rest of the world, at least the Hopi were, and they carried on their tradition. But because everybody becomes, you know, as the white man has influenced, people end up doing different things. And so some of these tribes are trying to reclaim some of their and bring back the old traditions of what they did. Mm-hmm. And some of it's kind of hard because it's been lost, but I guess it all has to fall before Christ comes back and retrieves everybody, or those who are in that condition anyway.
Marv, can I throw a reminder out? Partly a reminder that we do have the Adolfos among us, and I feel like in the things that they share, it reveals some of that perspective of the natives. You can't see me, I'm not on camera, but I'm as Gentile, I think, as you can get. I'm almost glowing. I'm so Gentile.
You're a white boy. You're a Bahana.
And I haven't heard everything that they've taught either. But each time that I've listened to them speak, I feel like I'm getting a bit new perspective even on some of the same principles. And I feel like they're opening up my understanding a little bit to the native perspective. And I'll just leave it at that rather than get into any specifics. But I think the message that they have is part of us understanding a little bit better how we can relate to the remnant groups.
I agree with that. There was the clean and unclean animals. I think you can find it on YouTube still, but Rob went into a lot of details of the different similarities or the symbolism. And so I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one thing too is we don't have the fullness of the fathers. You know, we're looking for some of these experiences and some of these treasures and these records that, you know, I think it would be wise for us to have humility in realizing that we don't have the whole picture either. And so if we could remember that when approaching other people, that yes, we're looking for a restoration of all things too. You know, not to have the attitude of, oh, let me tell you what everything is. You know, like we have snippets and we have pieces, but it all fits together in a whole picture, and they probably have pieces to that picture too. So
yeah. And when Christ came, he went to many different tribes, and what he did is he gave a handprint on a rock to many different tribes. In fact, there's one in St. George, a handprint of Christ. It's the exact same handprint that is in Hopi, same size, same everything.
oh, wow.
And so he did go and speak to those people. They have a different way of looking at things, which I admire, because, I mean, well, I shouldn't say I admire, I understand it. They live things much easier, and I mean, you know, all the laughing and the joy. And let me go back. I went down there. I brought my wife down there. We went down there, and we were staying at the farmhouse. And Manuel comes over that night and said, "Hey, look, I know that you come down and everything, but," he says, "I got to work in the fields." And I said, "Well, we came down here to help you." And he said, "Oh, okay." And I says, "Well, what are you going to do tomorrow?" And he says, "Well, I got to go to the fields, and then we're going to go and pick up some herbs." And I says, "Great. Hey, let's be over here. And what time are you going to be over here?" And he says, "Oh, I'll be there, you know, just right as the sun's coming up, or barely, you know." I says, "Well, what time is that going to be?" And he says, "Well, about 5 o'clock." And I says, "Okay." So he comes over there, and we go out and we work in the fields from about 5:15 until about 8:30, and then it starts to get warm. We were going to go out and pick weeds, and we did. And then in that afternoon, we went out, and this is typical Hopi. And he says, "Well," I said, "Well, let's go and get the herbs." And he says, "Well," I says, "is it very far?" And he says, "Oh, no, it's not very far. It's just a little ways." And so I says, "Okay." Well, we jumped in the car, and I said, "Which way do we go?" And he says, "Go over towards Second Mesa." And we go out towards Second Mesa, and we turn off, and we end up going towards Flag. And we go and go and go and go and go. And finally I says, "Manuel, how far is this?" He said, "Oh, just a little ways." And we just keep on going. Well, we get we go about 80 miles before we find this thing, you know. But it's kind of like the Lord, you know. The second coming's been coming since he died. And so anyway, then that night, what they traditionally do is that they, because you work in the fields, they feed you that night. And so we went, since we worked over at Manuel's father's field and their field. Manuel brought food. Oh, we went over to Manuel's mother's and father's house, and there was him, Manuel, and his wife, his brother and sister, and the father and mother, and everybody brought food. We all came there, and it was just like a party, and we were just laughing and talking, and they were talking in Hopi, and what Hopi words that they didn't know, they said in English. And so you're just kind of getting skips of what they're kind of talking about. And then I said, I don't understand this. Can somebody explain this to me? And, and so, I mean, we end up just laughing and having a fun time over what's going on. But it's really, these people are very, very more childlike. And I'm not talking about like little kids, but their spirits are so childlike, and they're so humble, and I'm talking more traditionalist, that and so loving and caring, and I just melt. And I remember picking up Brooke when she was a little girl. She's about 25 now. But she was probably about 3 or 4 at the time, and picking her up and putting her on my shoulders, and it dawned on me that that's what the scriptures say, that the Gentiles have put the remnant on their shoulders, and so forth. So anyway, I don't know how long people want to go, but I thought I'd kind of throw some things out. One is, folks, these are things that Native Americans want to tell white people, and I thought that I would kind of read some of this. One person said, this is a statement by one lady, a Native American lady. She goes, we must all seek wisdom from elders and those of proper knowledge, and use the most basic of common understanding to be kind to each other, regardless of culture and history. Remember, esteem and reverence start in the home, and it is passed on from there to others.
Now, were these questions you asked them personally?
No, these are questions that I picked up off the internet that are reliable sources, and some of them were told to me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixture. One says, if you invite, the decorum does vary greatly. The decorum does vary greatly from nation to nation and tribe to tribe, and even clan to clan. But there is a general set of what one might call mutual consideration, or common courtesy, or better yet, just plain old civility and good manners. If you invite a Native American or a Native elder into your space, that means if they come and they are close to you, treat them with respect, like we do. We let them eat first. We let them have your seat. Listen to them. They are not props. Another one says, don't ask us what our Indian name is. For example, him. What's your Indian name? Me, Simon. Him. No, I mean, what's your real Indian name? Me, I'm Ogallala, and my name is Simon. Do not use cliches or insulting comments like a low man on the totem pole or Sid Indian style or any of that kind of thing. I hope that would never occur. Quit trying to, here's one that says, quit trying to tell me how my history went. Listen, don't explain our culture to us. Let us tell our own stories. And that's happened many times. Be a good listener and put your ego aside, says another one. Look for and hang out at your local Indian center. There are centers, Los Angeles, Denver, various places. If you have an Indian center, you can go and learn from them. When you show up, be humble, learn, and just listen. An elder once told me, the Creator gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Don't tell me what I should be honored by. Let me tell you how to honor me. No, Native Americans are not all drunks. Please stop assuming that. In their culture, because of the white man influence and so forth, it has changed. And I for those who I know John's on here somewhere, John Keyworth, but he and I played pro football, and when I played down in Dallas, which is down in the South, and of course in the 70s, and still there was problems at that time, and you'd get into the plane, and I'd walk to the back of the plane where all the blacks would stay, and I'd be the only white guy back there, and I didn't care, but other people, the whites thought that I was crazy going back there. But heck, we're all a team. I'm sure John could tell you stories about that too. But every culture has their good, bad, and ugly. They're no different than we are. We have drugs, they have drugs. They have holy men, we have holy men. We have religious people, they have religious people. It's all the same. Folks always want to come to a Native community to learn our ways. I'm like, it would be much more helpful if you just check out your own people. But if you do visit a reservation, don't go for self-enlightenment. Go because you genuinely want to learn something. When you go down to a reservation, if you want to break into a reservation, I was taken down there by Joe Sampson called me up, and Bob Phillip was going down, and so we were invited down to go down there. That's a great way to break into a in that setting. I've taken Glenn. I see Glenn's on here. I've taken Glenn down there. Dee Dee is on there. I've taken them, and of course Jared and Christine, and I don't know who else. Oh, Jen's on there. Hi, Jen. I don't know who else is down there, but there will be opportunities to go down there, and I'm willing to do that. But that it would, well, anyway. You want to go down there to learn, and when you first go down there, you don't want to be really inquisitive, because then they'll think that you're a tourist or a little child. You want to, when you first go down there for the first little bit, you want to let them talk. Let them, when you say something, when you do say something, let them give you, let them talk and learn from them. And then as you gradually go along, then you can open up conversation, but just don't cram things down their throat. Another one is not all natives practice their people's spirituality. Some are Christian. Some may even be Judaist or Buddhist. I got to tell you something about that. I've said this to a few people, in 1962, in 1959, the Hopi people, or the Hopi elders, went back to the House of Micah. That's a Hopi term for the House of Glass, which was the United Nations, to warn them if they continue on this path, that only destruction will follow. They did not allow them to go into the United Nations and plead their case. And then 3 years later, the Hopis called all the tribes together, or as many tribes as could, and they invited them to Hopi. And then Masao, their Christ, invited other people, other tribes around the world to come. One of them was the Tibetans, the Tibetan monks. The Tibetan monks came because Christ told them to come to this meeting in 1962 and to go back to where they came from, because that's where the Tibetans came from. There's a relationship, a very close relationship between the Tibetan monks and the Hopi people, because they believe that the Hopi people are the head of all the tribes, along with Chief Joseph with the Lakota. When I met him, he believed that also. When I've been down there, I was down there over a weekend, and we were over on Second Mesa, and all of a sudden these two Tibetan monks came in, and we talked with them. They had an English translator, and we had a delightful talk, and they said, "We've come home to see our place of origin." Anyway, just a thought. Some are they have their different religions, but the spiritual ones all believe in a great spirit or the great creator. You have another one says, "I don't want to hear about how you watched a PBS special and question me about it, and then pretend that you know more than me. I am walking, breathing, and living this life." What PBS does sometimes, and I've seen stuff on TV that relate to Hopi. I've seen it on YouTube, and I've seen all this other stuff, and it's different most of the time. Another one, don't if you go to a powwow, you don't want to touch anybody's regalia. You never take pictures on a reservation, and that's just the way that it is. It's I sent out a little while ago on YouTube. There was the Eagle Dance of last year, 2019. No, it was maybe it was 2020. And it was on there. Now, the Eagle Dance is a social dance or a community dance. It's not a ceremonial dance. But even that really threw me off. So I hurried up and clicked it and sent it out to people so that they could at least look at it. But Hopi dances are far different than powwows. They do things far differently. They do things like what Nibley says. They're in conjunction with the stars and the moons and the solstice and the seasons. Anyway, so you don't take pictures on the reservations. If you want to go to a powwow, you can look them up. There's some up here in Cedar City. There's over at various other Indian reservations. If you go there, just go there and observe and watch. I've done that many times to where I just go and watch, and sometimes I'll talk to somebody, but I'll be very gentle but go there. If you want, another way to break into the tribe is go in there and just say, hey, I'm looking to help fix roofs and everything, roofs or doors or windows. We did that. You can do that. They're always welcome to do that. Now, some tribes are different. They'll take advantage of you. Claudia would tell you that. Claudia Keyworth, she's on with us. She was worked with the Navajos. There's three. There's four. How I classify the Native Americans is that you have most of the Native Americans are like the Lakota or the Lakota Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Blackfoot or whatever. They're into one group. And then you have the Navajo is in another group. They came from Mongolia. And basically, they have their traditions, but they kind of share traditions with other tribes, and they actually pick up other tribes' traditions. And then you have the Polynesians, and those are the people that I believe went north. Hagoth went north, and I think like with the Tibetans, they went up north over the Bering Straits. But yet I've seen a documentary that Darlene, I think that's Darlene from our fellowship, and she sent me some things, but it talks about this lady, how she's traced from Alaska down to the Polynesian Islands, and how they backtracked over to there. So they are Native Americans as well. And then you have the Hopi, and the Hopi is completely different. Their ceremonies are completely different. They're so it's they do things very, very differently. You have so you don't want to take pictures. One guy goes, check your white privilege. Native Americans don't have the time or the emotional energy to labor through your hang-ups around race issues or your identity crisis. It's just being funny. Do not be phony with people. I can't emphasize that enough. They'll spot you a mile away because they're real. They're the traditionalists are very, very humble people, and they can feel your heart. They can every time I go down there, I feel like I'm being examined, but I mean, it's because they can feel yourself together. Karen, after I went down there and so forth, many years, she came up to me and she says, you are a Hopi. You would be a very good Hopi because you are real. You're a real person. They know if you're genuine or if you're just trying to look good, or but be real. Just to give you some etiquette down there, and it varies from tribes to tribe or from clan to clan. I know in different this is not necessarily Hopi, but it's other tribes.
Hey, Marv.
Yeah.
Quick pause. We've got another hand raise.
Oh, okay.
That next section.
I can't see that. So
okay.
Who's that?
So it looks like Renee Eva Gore.
Oh, hello. This is Eva Gore.
Oh.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, Eva.
Hey, I wanted to ask a question. A little while ago, among quite a few fellowships, there was word that had got around that there was a small group of Native Americans that had already brought again Zion and had a community up and running. So I was wondering if you could share more about that, if you're able to. And then also, I had another question about in Beloved Enos on page 90 down the bottom. Denver's talking about this ministry, and he calls them the Lamanites. You know, I'm not particularly fond of that name, but it says that ministry will begin when the sealed portion is brought about, and that that's when that ministry will begin. And I think the sealed portion contains, like, it's just my thoughts, like the record of Xenos, and even the Jews and the Gentiles and the Lamanites just won't be able to doubt the truth of those words. So I'm wondering how are things leading up to that? Because, like, in the own due time of the Lord, when that sealed portion is given, that's when the work really takes off, because it's in the power of the Lord.
I have heard some buddy tell me about Native American people up in Canada starting a Zion community. I'm not into. I think that's way premature, and so I discount that personally. The second thing is how I believe, and that is that Denver is a dispensation head, and he's in doing what the Lord wants him to do, and he has gone to the Gentiles, and that's it. And so, as far as I'm concerned, for me, is until Denver does something and opens that up, I think it's premature that anything in reality would be good, other than the fact that you can go and start to be friends with these people and to establish relationships and enjoy the people and what they have to teach you, because in reality, like we discussed earlier, we don't have it all. They don't have it all. And what we have and what they have is probably not enough, or it's been corrupted in their own way, like the LDS church has been corrupted. And so you just, for me, the best thing to do at this point in time is to just, because having a relationship with Native Americans takes time, and you just don't do it overnight. I mean, I've only known one that has done it really quickly, much quicker than normal, I should say. And well, two of them, and they're online, right, Jared? And Christine, that have done that, but they've had some background in that, and it's worked out well. The best thing to do in order to fulfill the covenant is start working with Native Americans, no matter which way it goes. I mean, there's Native Americans all over the place, and you can go out and do things with them. I know the Gibsons up in Idaho. They go out and work. She's Native American, but they go out and help in that way. Just go and find places to work with that they have Native American centers or Native American tribal units somewhere, and go working with them and establish a relationship. What do you think, Jared?
I was actually thinking through some thoughts I've had. I don't have anything definite because I'm still trying to figure this out too. Some things I've thought about, Eva, as it relates to the timing and the sealed portion relative to the remnant being taught. Again, no answers, but a few things that I've read that I continue to think about. One is and I don't have it off the top of my head here, but there's a few places where when Denver references the restoration, he talks about to the Gentiles and then to the remnant and then to the Jews. And so, again, not an absolute, but a question in my head is that indicative of a timing or a sequence in which things need to move forward? And then the second thought that I've had along with that is the cultures are so different. And when the Book of Mormon came forward to the Gentiles in 1830, it was produced and brought forth in a way that would be understood and accepted by that group of Gentiles, because they were Christian and needed something that sounded like a Bible in order to fully embrace it. And again, not an answer, but a question in my mind: is there something as it relates to the natives, perhaps the sealed portion, perhaps something else, but is there something related to the native groups or the remnant groups that's going to be familiar to them, so that when a message is brought forth about Jesus Christ, they will be able to see the similarities and make the connections with what they've historically and traditionally believed in, and again, be a tool, a revelation that's going to allow them to rise up and embrace Jesus Christ as he is, versus today. And I don't know, but whatever evolved view they have of him. Because another thing that's challenging, at least with the Hopi, I don't know that it's true with other traditions with the natives, but their tradition is an oral tradition. And so when you think about 2,000 years of time passing and how many people spoke a story or a message from one person to the next without ever writing it down, it seems anyway, that message can drift quite a bit. We've all played the telephone game, so we know what that's like and how quickly some of those things can shift. And so I think about that, and I think there's some other things here that still are on the horizon that are going to help with the message and help to convert those who may have, at least today, inherited a oral tradition that has been evolved in any number of ways, and be able to connect that back to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And another thought is, I'm not even bold enough to say that it needs to look exactly the same way as what we've been handed. Right? We know that there's some core principles in the doctrine of Christ and in the Sermon at Bountiful that are the foundational pieces to allow a group of people to live together in peace. And all these other things that we do, in my mind, may or may not be present in a remnant group that rises up and establishes their own, or begins to establish rather, the belief among that community. So that was a whole bunch of non-answer there, Eva, but just some of my thoughts and some things that I've thought about as it relates to and perhaps timing and how this all might eventually rise up.
And thanks, Eva, for your question. When you got it all figured out, let us know on that. But let's move on because it's getting late. I just want to go through some, finish up with the house etiquette. It says, do not trouble or pester Native Americans in their home about their culture, especially if it's your first time in the home. Listen and learn. Politely ask what you can do to help. Okay? Repay calls of courtesy and do not delay in communication. We talked about that earlier. Always ask before entering a home. Follow the customs of the home, not your own home. Otherwise, remember to follow the rules of the house that you're in. It's better, you have to jump into their world. Anytime they offer food, you should accept. Okay, it's in some cultures, it's a rejection if you do. Be careful for any and all offers from the. Be grateful. Be grateful for any and all offers from the host. Never worry the host with your own troubles. Talking to them. Present the host with a gift. When you get to that point, you'd probably want to do that. Let silence be your motto. Listen, learn, and then speak. Show kindness, charity, humility, and then greater humility. Talk with others, but do not force conversation. Let them teach you. Native Americans are generous and thoughtful gift givers. The richest people are those who are willing to give away everything they own. What's that?
Oh, is my mic off? Sorry, my kid's bugging me.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking a question or something. And then it's your own actions of politeness that speak more than your words. So the last thing is that we have one opportunity in May, and we'll have another one. Two opportunities to go down to Hopi, and it's offered to anybody. These are work projects, fixing roofs, walls, and windows and so forth in the homes. We need your time, your skill, your tools, and your money. Anytime you participate into a project, you should participate with everything. These projects will be posted. I guess we can put them on Covenant Chat or get the word out. But we're in May, we're gonna, if we raise enough funds, we need about $4,600, $4,600 to $5,000 to do that one. We're tearing off a roof that is virtually part of it's collapsed or near collapsing, and so we have to replace the whole roof and take it off, put it on, and then replace the flooring because it's leaked, and then put a ramp up. Housing's a little short down there, and so this is a grandmother's house that needs to fix up so that some of the children can move in and occupy that space. And then as soon as we acquire another house, there'll be some fixing to do on that roof, but that will be, we're still in court on that one. And as soon as we get that completed, then we'll have one more project to do. But it will require people, the roof one will probably take maybe, we're thinking about going down on a Wednesday and coming back on a Sunday. So it'd be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days, and maybe 3.5 days to take it off and to put it back on, full days. And so anybody can participate into that. And we appreciate this opportunity to talk. But we also offer an opportunity to put what we've talked about into practice, and to see how those people live and act and do things. I do suggest, if you can find God's Chosen People of America by Azula Brinkerhoff, you'll get into the more traditional, true Hopi culture. If you're looking at Hopi, if you get into other cultures, go to the Native American tribe people that write, and they'll tell you a little bit better because they're being a little bit more open now. But in Hopi, it's a little bit different because all the elders have died now, and things are now people are popping up. Such as, I know a guy over on Second Mesa, his name is David, and now he's become a Hopi elder, and he's going out there, but he's doing it for money, and we all know how that goes. So anyway, I want to thank everybody. We'd like to have a word of prayer, if possible, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Is there any other questions that anybody would like to talk about? If not, can we, what is that? It had one chat. What is that, Jared?
It's a thank you from Erica.
From Erica?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Erica. I appreciate you getting on. And if you have any questions or anything, you can email me, and you're welcome to do that. My email, if you have a pen and a paper, it's zayin77@gmail.com. Zayin is a Hebrew letter, And the number with that Hebrew letter is 7. So mine is zayn77@gmail.com for any, if you have any other questions. I appreciate everybody coming, and thank you very much.
My name is Sam Vaughn. Dana and I were invited to take part in a panel discussion to put forward some ideas of how to approach the obligation to seek to recover the lost sheep remnant of this land. We had intended to participate in the discussion with Marv and the others, but due to changing circumstances, we found it easier to simply record some thoughts. I lost the coin toss, so it's my voice you'll have to bear with. First of all, please bear in mind that I'm not suggesting any fast rules. The scriptures are plain that we're to be led by the Spirit at all times, whether to preach or to sing or anything else the Lord might have us do. I simply want to share some ideas that I've come to from prayerfully trying to understand experiences and interactions that I've had. I don't intend to entertain with stories of powwows and killing buffalo and smoking the peace pipe. I'll leave that up to those who know a lot more about those things than I do. I am an expert of nothing, and so I've come to talk to you about green jello with shredded carrots. The 400th anniversary of the first Thanksgiving is coming up. Not this year, but in 21, if I'm not mistaken. But what occurred in 20, I think, was just as important, if not more so. Were it not for Squanto in his efforts to the pilgrims to help them through that first year, through that first winter, the pilgrims probably would not have made it. And so the next year, to show gratitude, the Bradfords invited him over to Thanksgiving dinner. My wife is from Arizona, but she was raised by people from back east, and one dish that they would eat for Thanksgiving, which I hear is one of the original dishes served nearly 400 years ago, is called succotash, which comes from a Narragansett word meaning broken corn. And until I was first married, I only heard it was something you suffered, at least according to Sylvester, the cat. Then I tried it and removed all doubt. Being from Utah, we always had Jell-O in various forms and colors. Dana has always thought it was really odd to have Jell-O for Thanksgiving, but I think she tolerates it now. If you've ever made Jell-O or eaten Jell-O, you know it takes the shape of whatever you use as a mold. You might have stars or American flags on the 4th of July, or an entire bunt pan for large institutional functions. I don't know if it was just happenstance or intentional, but growing up in Utah, it was always there. I guess as a little object lesson as to what was expected in the institution. Fit the box, fit the mold, have a seat in the foyer. There's an old rabbi who explains what Nimrod was up to when he was building the Tower of Babel. So Nimrod, as we know, was the mighty hunter in the land, or according to some sources, the mighty hunter of the Lord's people. Nimrod is the archetypical tyrant who founded Babylon, and in many traditions was the builder of the tower. He it was, after the flood, who found that it was easier to control people by crowding them into cities and making them think, act, talk, and dress the same. To read from Genesis, and they said one to another, "Come, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and they had tar for mortar. And they said, "Come, go to, let us build us a city, and a tower whose top will be nigh near unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down, beholding the city and the tower which the children of men were building. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people are the same, and they all have the same language, and this tower they begin to build." The rabbi explains that the bricks are a metaphor for the people. Bricks, as you know, are made by taking clay and forcing or pressing it into a mold, clay being pliable and moldable, then burning them thoroughly to dry them. So with pressure and heat, the bricks all come out looking and feeling the same. Now, in the ending of the kingdom of Babylon, there was a king who had a dream about an image made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and iron mixed with miry clay. A stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, which struck the feet, broke it in pieces, and ground it to powder. The king, Nebuchadnezzar, apparently inspired by this dream, set up a giant image in the plains of Dura for all the people to worship, which, if they didn't, they were cast like a brick into the fiery furnace. So this, among other things, was one of the hallmarks of what the image represents, the influence of Babylon. Conform or die. This influence, as we've learned, has dominated in political, social, cultural, and religious spheres ever since. For the past 500 years, missionaries have been preaching to the natives of this land. Prior to that time, the influence of Babylon hadn't touched them. First, they were pressed into a Catholic mold under the auspices of the Inquisition. The Spanish built missions, churches, and told the people they couldn't speak their language, sing their songs, do their dances, or pray to their God. In fact, they were told the only access they could have to God was through a middleman wearing a brown frock who would speak to God for them. Then came Protestants and Mormons with their own molds to press the people into. Now, I'm not here to recount all the details of what the people have encountered, except to show that in the name of God, the people have been moved off their land, stripped of their way of life, separated from their parents, punished for speaking their language, beaten, driven, and killed. This is all well known, and I don't want to focus on that, but we should bear it in mind. These are the things that come about through colonialism. So we need to approach this differently than has been done before. And I believe the Lord intends to break the mold, to grind that influence to dust. And so if we have the true message that God intends to bring to the inhabitants of this land, surely how we approach it must be different than what has gone before. What is needed, I think, and what they haven't really encountered is a people who live the teachings of Jesus, who live the Sermon on the Mount, to not only to say, but to do. Consider the different results of the preaching of Aaron and Omner and Himni and Mulekai, and that of Ammon. There was a big difference. But what made the difference? They were all sons of Mosiah, well, except Mulekai. He just got an honorable mention. They gave, all of them, they gave up a kingly lifestyle, put everything on the altar, and suffered hunger, thirst, and fatigue. Yet the majority of the group failed to make converts, except one only. It's interesting, the record points out, at least initially. But their approach was different than Ammon's. Ammon's approach was to show rather than tell, to serve rather than preach. He wasn't there to tell them what they ought to do, what they ought to learn. I've, heard, just recently been told of some projects on reservations to go and replace a roof, to replace a tile floor in homes of widows. Also to build greenhouses to help people regain self-sufficiency and food independence. I think that's the kind of thing that would be good for us to do. Let's do that. Let's feed the hungry, clothe the naked, house the homeless, take abuse if it's offered, turn the other cheek. Give to those that ask of you, be easily entreated. And I think when they are satisfied that you are who you claim to be, they may ask about your religion. Ammon waited until he was asked. This all takes patience and relationships, real genuine relationships. And I don't think there's a shortcut for that. We need to preach by example. I want to mention just a few more ideas, and then I'll be done. It's been suggested to me that us telling them about their own culture isn't effective. In fact, it's really, really, really annoying. Rather, I think, than trying to make connections for them about how similar their culture is to traditions that are more acceptable to us, we might try making connections with them and developing friendship and equality. One tendency is to either put ourselves on a pedestal, pridefully assuming that our knowledge is higher than theirs, that they must conform to our way. Or, on the other hand, putting them on a pedestal, envying their wisdom and spirituality. Is it possible that both are equally necessary? Nephi was told by the angel in his panoramic vision that if the Gentiles harden not their hearts against the Lamb of God, and I would say also the sermon at Bountiful, they would be numbered among the seed of his father, rather than the other way around, which has kind of been how it's been presented really over the last 500 years. Somebody asked me, how do we ensure order and control in the movement, considering all the different types of people we hope will come into it? My thought is we don't. In the Book of Abraham, when the gods are creating, they order the elements by speaking, and then wait for them to obey. Another way to put it is the way Joseph Smith did: teach correct principles and allow them to govern themselves. It requires labor to persuade and not force or compulsion. At times we may not even realize we're using compulsory means. I think we should be very careful when we feel we are right and wish others to do what we think is right. It's a very important thing. A thought that came to me is, why not allow them to eat their own bread and wear their own apparel, sing their own songs, and dance their own dances, even metaphorically speaking, if you will. My thanks to Marv and the other organizers of the conference for all of their hard work and the invitation to share some of my thoughts. Thanks.